So basically, the topic was model, measure, manage, the journey to autonomous security in a hybrid multi-cloud world. So what does that mean? So I'll talk about that. So Peter Drucker, one of the fathers of modern business management in MBA school, they teach you all about Peter Drucker. He said a lot of things, and he's credited. Some people debate whether he said it, but he's credited with saying, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So from a security perspective, if you want to feel secure, you have to look at what are you actually measuring? Because if you're not measuring it, so the idea is, what are you measuring from a security perspective? If you want it to improve things, only the things that you actually look at and measure can you see if you're improving. Because improvement means that you have a current state and you have a destination state, which would be better, and that you're moving from your current state toward that destination state. And the only way you can prove that is if you're actually measuring your progress. So from a security perspective, everybody talks about risk. You want to be less risky. And that sounds simple. So yeah, we all want to be less risky, but defining what is risk or what is risky from a computer software identity perspective isn't an easy thing. And if you ask even a bunch of experts, they're not going to give you the same answer. So you might think it's a clear concept that everybody understands, but really it's like many shades of gray that can be debated by two people who have been working together. So the idea is, what does it mean to be secure from a company perspective in relation to what we do, which is identity management? Because if you've been in identity management or privileged access management or cybersecurity, you know that none of us should ever really feel safe. No matter what you do, no matter if you're government level security, given enough time, if you're a target, your odds of not being hacked are zero. I mean, you will be hacked. So we always have to assume breach, which means that you can't pretend that you can keep the hackers out. You have to come with the mindset that they're already inside, you're already being probed, you're already being hacked. How can you limit the damage they can do if they are hacking you or when they hack you? Because it's an eventuality for everybody. You're never going to keep them out. Nobody wants to hear this, but assume breach is the way you have to think about security these days. Not pretend that they're not going to get in. So the only goal would be that if they're going to get in, then it better be really infrequent, and if they better be really, really good. You don't want to stupid vulnerabilities, lazy access management, where it's easy for any script kiddie to download Mimikatz and hack your network. So you better have better controls than that. They better be actually pretty good. So let's dive in. Excuse the pun. Let's dive into this. So today, why is it more complicated? So multi-cloud is the new normal. You'll hear about multi-cloud a lot. Multi-cloud means that you have more than one cloud provider. So you might have some things in Amazon, some things in Google GCP, some things in Azure, and almost everybody we deal with out there they're multi-cloud. And so if you look at the numbers for that, why is that a problem? If you look at the major top 4 cloud providers, they have, and you add up the permissions. So permission would be like the ability to create a group, to read blob storage, to start a Kubernetes cluster. They have about 40,000 permissions, which is a lot. And 50% of those permissions would be classified by most security professionals as being high risk. So lots of permissions now because we're all using the cloud, and most of them are risky, or half of them are risky. So that creates a big challenge. And if you look at it, people don't understand the permissions on these systems very well. We have a skill shortage, a knowledge gap. So 95% of your privileged admins have way too many permissions. You just give them global admin or the equivalent, all access. So they're way over permissioned, so they're dangerous. They're basically loaded weapons. Typically, the admins only use 10% of their permissions per day, so they're unnecessarily dangerous. They could be a lot less dangerous and still get the job done. And this is causing clear problems. 75% of security failures are the company's own fault. Inadequate management of identities, access, and privileges. So this is a good marketing thing for us because this is what we do. We try to help companies have more than adequate management of identities, access, and privileges. That's our core mission. And this seems to be a huge problem, a huge gap. And another problem our customers are facing is a skills gap. 76% of companies do not have appropriately skilled people or can't hire people. They have big gaps. And 39% of the gap is in cybersecurity. So things related to security, it's gotten more complicated. It's gonna shoot. It's gonna kill you. You're gonna get hacked, and they can't hire people. So that's a big problem. So what's left? What can you do about it? If you can't solve it by hiring people, training people fast enough, well, you could panic. Panic's probably a natural first reaction. But what if you take a step back? What can you actually do? Well, the good thing is that it's not unprecedented. So people think this is a completely new, nobody's ever had to deal with anything like this before. But if you look at SAP, SAP is an extremely complicated beast. It has 1 million permissions. So saying that the cloud providers are complex and it's something completely new is not really true. SAP is ridiculously complicated. So maybe we can use some of the same ideas that have been used to manage systems like SAP or Oracle ERP to apply to these cloud platforms. So maybe model the permissions, measure our progress, and then manage. Well, if we don't have people to manage it, then really, if we have a skills gap and a shortage of workers, we need to focus on automating. What can we do to automate? So automating means that you have to have a clear process or an end goal that you're trying to get to. So how do we define what is risky, what is safe, and how do we model risk? If you look out there and try to research it, nobody says the same thing. What's actually risky, different people define it differently, or they don't even define it at all. They basically say that you have risky groups and you have non-risky groups, which doesn't really help. If you look at this top 12 identity access risk metrics, the only thing everyone agrees on, which is a simple one, is that orphan accounts are bad. So if you have an orphan account, which means an account that's active, that doesn't clearly have a person or owner, so you're not managing the life cycle. It's not tied to it. Does this person still exist in the company? Should it still exist? It's just an orphan floating around out there. Those cause tons of problems, account takeover, lots of things. That's the one thing everybody agrees on. After that, it's pretty blurry, fuzzy as to what is risk. And here's a good example. It shows different types of risk. So the first person, she can create new privileged admin users in an Azure Active Directory. So that's clearly a technical activity or action-based risk. Her capability to do that is risky. George here, George can export and share all of your payroll data. So George can't do things like creating privileged accounts, but he has risky access to sensitive data, and he could exfiltrate or do a data dump, and that's extremely risky. Obviously, that's super risky. And then the last one is business activity risk. Someone who can approve purchase orders that they created themselves. So it's not a technical risk like creating an admin account, but it's a business risk like creating a purchase order. And who's to say which of these is riskier? I mean, that's really to be judged by the company experts, the business people, for them to classify which of these they consider more dangerous to their company and the risk levels. But we can see these are all risky, and they're all done by IT systems, even if it's a business-related risk. So if you think about risk in a simple fashion, it's typically what you can do, like create a purchase order and approve it, or create an Azure privileged account, or what you can access because the things you're accessing have been classified in some way as risky. Personal information, payroll data, financial data. So that's really risk, are those two things. Simply defining specific groups and flagging them as risky, which a lot of products do, is very brittle. It's like if the group's access isn't what you think it is, and it's actually risky, then that's bad. Or if new groups get created that you don't know what they get access to, grant access to, and they're risky, that's bad. So it gives you a false sense of security and a very big blind spot. So what we try to do, and this is the whole field now they call KIM, or Cloud Infrastructure Entitlement Management, or DREAM, which is what Kuppringer Cole calls it. It's a whole new field. We got rated really well because we're one of the people who are leading the charge on this, is how do you understand these cloud permissions, because they're all different, without having a bunch of experts hired that don't really exist? How do you use software to understand it and make sense of it, to know, based on the permissions, something that makes sense, like can manage virtual machines that the business people can assign a risk level to. So you could say, well, we could name our groups or roles things that make sense, but they can't be trusted, because you could have a group called no need to worry, limited access, and really it's granting risky permissions, and you never know it, because maybe when it was created it wasn't risky, but now somebody granted it access it shouldn't have, and now it is risky. So the only way to really know is to get below the group or role level to the permissions level, the fine-grained entitlements. And the only way to do that is to really be able to talk about risk in a way that's business level or functional level. So that's what we call our functions. So we ship functions. You can create functions like create group, create purchase order. They could be technical or business. And they're really the glue that ties together the technical access with business-friendly terms and risk. So we allow you to say, okay, that Dave, he can manage Azure app passwords because his user account is a member of a group that's a member of this Azure role, which grants these permissions. And we know that the ability to manage Azure application passwords is achieved by having these permissions, which we know the role has. So then we can know that Dave can manage Azure app passwords, and then tying it together with a monitoring system or log harvesting, we can know if Dave is actually using those permissions. So we can say, okay, which permissions, eventually the goal would be, we know every permission Dave has, we know from which roles he has it, and we know which permissions he's using, and we know which permissions he's not using. So therefore, we can take away the 90% of permissions that he never actually uses and give him the 10% he uses. And then that 10%, we can make it just in time. So when he goes home at night, he doesn't have those permissions. He only has them for short periods of time, just enough, just in time access. So that's kind of the overall goal in order to get less risky, is to understand permissions allow you to do dangerous things. And if you have these permissions, we can see which dangerous things you can do. We can figure out which dangerous things you don't actually do, and we can take them away. And then the dangerous things that you actually do, that you need to do, we can control your access. So that would be a zero trust, least privilege model. And of course, since you don't have them when you don't use them, that would be zero standing privilege. You don't have all of these privileged accounts sitting around all the time that are like loaded guns. You only load the gun when you need to shoot the gun, and otherwise it's not loaded. So if you look at that, how do you define what would be a desired state? How do you measure progress? How do you move from here to somewhere better? If you look at it, the easy ones are high risk access that you should not have because it violates your risk policies, like a segregation of duties or something like that. You should use the risk engine, and you should remove them. If it's something that's risky that you shouldn't do, remove it. If it's something that's high risk that you actually don't use, then optimize it or remove it. Remove it means you lose it. Optimize it means you convert it into just-in-time access. So if you ever did need to use it, you could quickly click and activate your access in the IM shop and have it for a short period of time. But if you never use it, you could just remove it. High-risk access that you do use, you should optimize it so it's not standing privilege, it's just-in-time access that you can click and activate, and you should recertify that risky access frequently to make sure it's still appropriate, it still matches your current job role, and somebody's okay with you having it. Low-risk access that you do not use, yeah, I mean, you not really a threat. You could optimize it, you could remove it, or low risk access you use. That's the best access. That's the access you want to keep, and you don't have to worry about. So these are the kind of the things you could use a tool like EmpowerID to move you in to a better position. So how do you know if you're moving into a better position? Well, humans are very visual. We're visual primates. The best way for us to understand something quickly is if we have visual indicators, visual KPIs, a dashboard, because people process visual images much faster, and it sticks in their brain a lot better. So that's where our risk analytics dashboard comes in, where we can measure your progress over time. So again, you model what would be a good environment. What does good look like? Good looks like this. That if it's high risk, you shouldn't have. We remove it. This is what good looks like, and then you can measure your progress over time from starting out really crappy, where everybody has risky access they don't need, they never use, and it's permanent, to somewhere better where you're optimized, as we call it, where people don't have risky access, or if they do, it's just-in-time access to where they're not permanently a member of those risky groups. They're only a member for short periods of time when they click to activate the access. So that's clear definition of progress, and you could show management that you're improving over time and getting better. So how do we get there? If you look at Martin Kuppinger, who was talking about policies and automation in last year, he said basically the idea is that you need policies. So policies define the desired state. Policies define the things that shouldn't happen and the things that should happen, or the goals, like we should never have people with this, or we should only have this many privileged admins, and then automation to make that happen because we don't have enough people to do it manually. So you define the policies and you have something that can automate them, and you need it to work across everything, cloud, on-premise. So policy define the things that should happen and the things that should not happen, and then EmpowerID, inventory or reconciliation, as some products call it reconciliation, we call it inventory. Inventory measures the actual state, which access do people really have, and then you measure that against the policies or the desired state, and you know the gap between where you want to be versus where you are, and then hopefully via automation, recertification, and rejecting access, et cetera, or optimization, you can get closer to where you want to be based upon the goals. So example policies might be 0 allowed orphan enabled accounts, or if that's too big of a goal, maybe 0 privileged orphan enabled accounts. And then you can report on that, you can measure it, you can correct it. Only less than 1% of your permanent privileged admins are permanent. So you can define policies from a business perspective and then try to implement those in a product to measure the gap and to help automate to get closer to that. And this is where you define what's acceptable or not acceptable. So how do you get it done if you have a 76% skills gap and you don't have enough people, or the people you have don't have the expertise for all these systems? So if you look at one thing called Tesla's law. Tesla's law is the idea that like when you make a coffee, the coffee machines used to require like expertise. You had to become an expert. You had to train under a master barista to make a good coffee. So the user simplicity was non-existent. It wasn't simple, but the product engineering wasn't that good. So if you want to make things simpler, like the most modern coffee machine, where the user simplicity is you click a button, you stick a capsule and you click a button, and it can even make you a macchiato or a cappuccino. Something has to give. So somebody has to bear the complexity. The complexity within a system is never decreased, it's only shifted. So you can shift the complexity away from the user and shift it toward the engineers, which are you guys. So you have to bear the complexity, which means you have to increase the engineering in order to take away user complexity so that they have to know less, understand less, and you can have people getting the same outcome or better, but not with a lot less skills and a lot fewer people. So it's even getting better now where you have robots. So the robot can make you a perfect cup of coffee, and you don't even have to be involved at all. So moving ahead, so the future, robots, automation, artificial intelligence, that's where you're going to make this happen, because we're never going to have enough skilled people. And maybe the skilled people should be working on something more valuable, more interesting than managing security permissions anyway. So if you think about the bot or how, Dave, do you still need this risky access, Dave? Then you could have something like a Sentinel bot, and Michael and Momfy can talk about Sentinel bots in a future session. But Sentinel bots are kind of like Sentinels in the Matrix. It's a bot that has a specific mission. It only cares about one thing, and it's out there doing its thing. So a Sentinel bot, which would be like the optimizer, where it can go find the people that have the risky access and try to convince them to let it convert their risky standing privilege into just-in-time access, or to lose the access. So you can have bots always looking to improve your statistics and decrease risk, finding risky people and trying to convince them to lose the risky access or to convert it into just-in-time access. And that's it. That's it. So thanks for the heads up. Any quick questions before I jump for the other call?
Just quickly, Patrick, in the financial industry, they measure risk by the credit score, the health score, the lead risk. Is there anything in the IDM industry that will measure the risk of people in the organization based like some kind of a score?
Yep, we do. So I'll show you that. So now that we are behind the scenes, let me give an example. So behind the scenes, our risk is based upon functions. We're adding another dimension to it. So right now, it's risk. The functions are things you can do, like all access in Active Directory is a function. Maintaining the data, the model in SAP is a function. Creating a group in Azure Active Directory is a function. And functions, when you create a function, the customers can define the risk level. Now, behind the scenes, each of these has a risk score, a number of risk points. So critical risk has like 100 points, high has like 80 or something like that. So these give you points. The functions have points. And then since we calculate, let me show you that. Since we calculate for each person the sum of all of the functions they can do. So for RT, I know all of her functional access. I can tell you exactly, the sum of all her functions. And since the functions have a risk level, RT has a risk score. So we know RT, if we look at RT or we look down here to see our risky people, we know not only how many people have risky functions, but we also have a risk score for each person based upon the risk level score of those functions. So we can calculate a risk score for a person, a risk score for a group, a risk score for a business or location or a set group. Any assignee in Empower ID can have a risk score now.
And the higher the number, the riskier, right?
Say again?
When the number, like 191 is more risky than 188.
Well, so let me show you that. So I'll if we even give you workflows to optimize the risk. So and here's where you can see the risk score. We need. I know we have it exposed to other places as well, but let's go look at. Okay, here's RT's risk score. RT has 1750. So the other number was the number of risky functions that she could do. This is the sum of the risk score of those functions. So that's the actual risk score. So we could say RT's too risky. Is RT on here? I know she's back today, I think. And we can see RT is too risky, and here are her risky groups. So this one's giving her a 200 risk score. This one's giving her a 200 risk score. This one's giving her a 280. So we could say, let's optimize these groups. And here are her management roles. We can see the risk granted from her management roles. And if we choose to optimize the risk, it's going to remove her from those and grant her pre-approved eligibility. So then she's no longer a member, let's say, of domain admins or let's say SaaS admins, but anytime she needs to be a member, she can come into the IAM shop and she can click a button to, let's see if I have any here, to activate. If I have any here that are pre-approved, I can click to activate. Let's see. Let's see if I have any. Nope, I don't have any, but you could click a button here and activate your access, and it would activate it for the number of minutes allowed by the access request policy that governs that role or that group or whatever you're happen to be activating. So SaaS admin is currently activated. I have the access only until this time. Once this time expires, the activate button will reappear where I could choose to activate it. So I'm not a standing privileged member, I'm a just-in-time member.
Yeah. Cool.
Cool. I better bail out though, but see y'all later. Bye guys.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.